Hello and welcome to the 2023-24 Comprehensive Needs Assessment Training Module for Title I, Part A. On behalf of our Director, Valdi Fortner, and myself, we welcome you to this training module. We look forward to the opportunity of working with you throughout this Comprehensive Needs Assessment period. We'd like to begin by focusing on the purpose of Title I, which is to ensure that all children have a fair, equitable, and significant opportunity to obtain a high-quality education and reach, at minimum, proficiencies on challenging state academic achievement standards and state academic assessments. The purpose of our training module today is to explain to you how Title I allocations are determined, highlight some new features in the CNA documents, provide guidance on how to utilize and complete your CNA Google Docs, and ease your mind throughout this entire process. So let's begin with determinations of Title I allocations. In order to help you plan your activities for 23-24, an allocation has been assigned to your school. And that allocation is based on data that we received from the October FTE known as Survey 2. Now, Survey 2 is not the survey that's actually used to determine Title I allocation for the district and then also for the schools, but it is our best data in order to start the planning process. How do we actually determine the final allocations? That's through what's known as the Public School Eligibility Survey, or PSES. And that information is based off February FTE, or Survey 3 data. That's data that will be provided to us by the Department of Ed during the grant writing process. But most likely we will not receive that data till mid to late March or even early April as we are writing the application for 23-24. So in order to help you in your planning purposes, we have used fall data in order to help determine a tentative preliminary allocation for your planning. Now, how was that allocation? We utilized your school membership or your student enrollment counts from October, and we applied the cliff percentage that we had from last spring. Cliff percentage was not provided to us during the fall Survey 2 period, so we utilized the cliff percentage that was reported by the state for your school last spring. So what's a cliff percentage? The cliff percentage is the percentage of students at your school who are considered children of low-income families. That's what CLIF stands for. What is often a confusing point for some within the school is all of our children receive the opportunity for free breakfast and lunch. So all of our students are CLIF. And in fact, that is not the case. Many of our schools in our district participate in the community eligibility provision, which does allow all students, no matter what their family income is, to receive free breakfast and lunch meals at the school. In order to identify the actual CLIF percentage, we use a determination called direct certification. Now, through direct certification, where the state is able to identify families at your school who receive federal assistance, such as Medicare, SNAP, state assistance like Medicaid, if a student is under the foster care system or participating in the McKinney-Vento homeless education program. There are also other federal and state programs that families may be participating in that would make them eligible through direct certification. So we utilize the direct certification in order to get a more accurate percentage of children of low-income families for each school. Utilizing that percentage, all schools are then put into what is called the rank and serve order. So schools with the higher percentage of CLIF students are ranked higher, and we start from the school with the highest CLIF percentage, and we go in order down to the school with the lowest CLIF percentage. Based on that rank, tiers of service are determined, at which point each tier is then assigned a PPA, or a per pupil allocation. So that's a funding amount that is applied to every CLIF student within that school and within that tier of service. For example, a school that has a CLIF percentage in the 90 to 100% tier of service would have a higher PPA, per pupil allocation, than a school that's in the 60 to 70% tier of service range. So schools with higher percentages of students from low-income families receive a higher priority of service. And that is how rank and serve works. So what we do is we take the number of students that were determined to be CLIF, multiply it by the PPA, and that is how the school's base Title I Part A allocation is determined. Parent and family engagement allocations is a separate allocation and is determined in a similar way, with PPAs in each of the tiers of service areas applied to the number of CLIF students at that school. So in some important details for you to remember as we are going through this process today and throughout the entire CNA process, is that the allocations that you are receiving are preliminary and tentative, based on Survey 2 information. When we receive final Survey 3 data, we will contact schools to let them know if there are any changes in their allocations. Allocations may go up, allocations may go down, depending on the data that the state provides to us through Survey 3 and the Public School Eligibility Survey, which is the PSES. So as we go through this process with you, we will be doing ongoing consultations so that you know exactly what's going on, but the amount of allocation that is being given to you through the CNA process is for planning purposes. It is preliminary and tentative, which is why number 4 on our details today is such a key factor, and that is prioritizing your CNA. And we'll talk about that in great detail as we get into looking at our activities and our budget worksheet. Now, the comprehensive needs assessment has 2 main parts. It has your school data section, and it has your budgetary activity section. And what you see before you in the inset on this slide is what one of the sections within your school data portion looks like. And there are 5 areas to the data portion. You have student demographics, early warning systems, student achievement, professional development and high quality staff, and parent and family engagement. In just a minute, we're going to actually go into our Sandbox school, which is our sample. And I'm going to walk you through each of these sections, and then we'll move on to looking at activities and budgeting for your comprehensive needs assessment. So let's go ahead and take a look in our Sandbox. Welcome to TI Sandbox Elementary School's Comprehensive Needs Assessment. You can see at the top that I am highlighting here. This is the statement of the tentative allocation for Title I Sandbox Elementary $240,000, and that was based on 240 eligible CLIF students. As I mentioned before, that's how many students were determined to be CLIF based on direct certification. So our first section is student demographics. You can see here that we ask for 3 years of longitudinal data, and that is because your Title I program should be able to help support school improvement goals as a whole. And in order to do that, you need to be able to identify trends within your school. And you do that by looking at historical data. So here you can see student demographic data from the 2020 to 21 school year through first semester of the 22-23 school year. You can get this information by using this link for EdStats or by utilizing the Florida SIMS platform, which houses your school improvement plan. Either location will have your demographic data that you can use to plug into your data review chart here. Below your data, you'll find a series of reflection questions. By reviewing these reflection questions, you're starting to think about and identifying where you would like to focus some school improvement goals, and more specifically, where you want to focus some of your supplemental activities. So you can see here, we've gone ahead and filled in some responses to some of the reflection questions. They've identified some key subgroups. They have identified some trends in their enrollment over the past 3 years. They've also started looking at possible activities that are needed to support their student demographic data. Going down, you can see that they've identified a couple of funding sources that are going to be used to support these activities. And they've identified that their implementation timelines and their measure of effectiveness will be indicated on their CNA budget worksheet. There are 3 links here below the section that we'll talk about in just a minute. But I want to go through the other sections of the data portion before we get to those links. Your next section is your early warning systems. So this has to do with your behavior, your attendance, and for schools who have courses like middle and high schools, maybe your course failures. A lot of this information we know the district is tracking through the ABC scorecard. And so that to help you access that data, a link to the Dashboard Central has been provided for you. So if you are a traditional district school, you'll be able to click here and go to that Dashboard Central landing page where you have access to operational information, behavioral information, and core academics. So a quick, easy step for you to grab some of the data that you need to complete your early warning systems as well as your student achievement. And one of my favorite features of this part is right here. For additional access or requests for your student-based staff, your school-based staff, or assistance with your dashboard, Bradley Reed in the Data and Analytics Department is your go-to person. So if you're needing a little more support or some explanation possibly of some of the data, Bradley is the person to go to that can help you with that. So I'm going to close this so that I can go back to our school data page. You can see that our sample school has filled in information. Again, the 2022-23 data is data just for first semester because that's all the data that we have at this point in the year. And you can see that there's some responses to the reflection questions have been entered to help the school identify where they want to focus some of their attention as far as their early warning systems and questions like that. And then we move down to our next section, which is the heart of what we do, our student achievement. Again, we're looking at longitudinal data looking at trends across different subgroups, looking at trends across content area. Because we won't have any gains data for 22-23, you can see that those have been darkened for you so that you don't have to worry about those. But again, looking at some of your other data, you have the link to the Dashboard Central here for our charter and private schools who are not part of the Dashboard Central platform. Feel free to please use whatever data sources that are utilized at your school for tracking students and how they are working toward their achievement goals. You can enter information like that down here under the reflection questions. It helps us understand what assessments or what data pieces you're utilizing for your decision making when it comes to your student achievement. You can enter that information down here in your reflection questions. And then we're going to move on to the professional development and high quality staff. This chart is designed specifically for traditional district schools. It contains the domains that are utilized in our teacher appraisal system. We realize that our private schools and our charter schools don't necessarily use that same system. So again, you can identify in your reflection questions what areas of need that your staff have and the different ways that you came about determining those needs. For example, in this sample, there were some staff surveys, there were classroom observations, and through the adoption of new standards and curriculums, they identified needs. They talked about how they are ensuring implementation of PD is ongoing, and they identified a key element of supplemental services that would be beneficial for their staff for 23-24. Then we get to our final section for our school data, and that is your parent and family engagement section. Again, we are looking for long-term trends in your parent and family engagement. You can see here, these many of these elements are part of the end of the year program evaluation for parent and family engagement. So those categories should be very familiar to school leadership and your staff. Excuse me. So you can see the school has completed, they've got their 2021 data, the 21-22 data, and data from first semester only for 22-23. And they've indicated that they've reviewed the reflection questions as they've been planning. Noted that first semester this year, participation levels are starting to be reflective of pre-COVID numbers, which would be a great sign. And they want to continue to work on engaging families on their program evaluation. They determined by looking at the numbers here that those numbers were a little bit lower than some of their other participation numbers. So they would like to try to get more families involved in that parent-family engagement program evaluation. They've identified that they want to also focus on content area learning extensions at home, as well as engaging their families and staff in ongoing collaborative communication and planning for those important transitions of families entering kindergarten and transitioning to middle school. If you were a middle school or a secondary school, your transition may be transitioning from 8th grade into 9th grade, from middle school into high school, or college and career readiness for our high schools who are trying to help their students and their parents prepare for what's going to happen after graduation. Now, I told you before that each section has these 3 links. Let me tell you what those are. Your first link is to a page that gives you directions and guidance on how to complete your comprehensive needs assessment. So after each section, you can go in and look for additional guidance as far as activities, how you might want to address your reflection questions, things like that. Oftentimes schools ask us, well, what's allowable and what's not allowable? Well, here you go. We have a handy dandy little chart that has a lot of information about what is allowable or not allowable. However, it's extensive, but not all inclusive of everything that could possibly be allowable or not allowable. So if you're considering something and you don't see it on here specifically spelled out, please feel free to reach out to your Title I team, and we will work through the process with you to help determine if what you're looking at could be allowable or would not be allowable. And then the last one, at the end of each section, you have a link directly to your budget worksheet. Now, this link at the bottom is actually is linked to one that is partially completed sample. I want to take you back up to the top and show you what a blank worksheet looks like to begin with, because we have a lot of new features this year that I'd like to go through with you before showing you what a completed worksheet might look like. So we are going to go into our blank sandbox to do a little playing around. So you can see, as mentioned before, TI Sandbox Elementary has a tentative preliminary allocation of $240,000, which is indicated here in row 1. Now, we want to make things as easy as possible for you, and we don't want you to have to go running around looking for all these different resources and all these different information in order to complete your CNA. So we have done our very best to include links to lots of different resources that we hope you will find helpful as you go through this process. The first one, again, is another direct link to the directions and guidance on completing your CNA. This link is a special request form, and we'll talk about that one a little bit more later when we get to supplemental activities. But this is a form that you would fill out if you're wanting to do an activity that's not showing up as one of the approved activities that we'll talk about in a minute. Oftentimes, schools need some assistance understanding the finance codes that are attached to all of their activities. So we have a coding reference chart that you can access right here. If you are working on stipends or travel, things of that nature, and you need some calculation help, we have a reference chart here to help you with those types of calculations. And again, here, another link to the allowable and non-allowable references. So let's talk about some of the new features in the body of the budget worksheet. It does look a little bit different for those of you who are experienced with doing the CNA budgets in our platforms. It does look a little bit different. We have lots of drop-down menus that we hope you're going to find helpful. A lot of this was directed through conversations with district leadership in order to bring alignment and continuity across Title I schools. So you're going to see some of those elements as I go through these with you. In the area of focus, when it comes to your basic budget, there are 4 areas of focus for your activities, your activity alignment. You'll have personnel, you'll have supplemental curriculum materials, extended learning opportunities, and professional development. Those are the 4 areas of focus. Each of those areas of focus are going to align with a category, and you'll find those categories in this link right here, which I'll show you briefly. We will come back and spend a little more time with this in a second. But under personnel, these are the types of personnel that have been approved by district leadership for schools. Under curriculum, supplemental curriculum materials, you can see the various content areas as well as technology. There's also the other that I mentioned briefly when it came to the special request form listed here. Under extended learning opportunities, we have EDI, summer school, School breaks and holidays. Some schools like to utilize that extra time and get some extra learning in for their students, as well as educational field trips. And under professional development, there's trainings directly linked to supplemental curriculums. There's also core material standards and benchmark alignments, professional development, PD on the core principles that have been adopted by the district, as well as the possibility of professional development with regard to parent and family engagement. You'll also see under parent and family engagement, which we haven't talked about just yet, the various types of activity alignment that are listed there. We'll talk about that more when we're looking at that budget. So I'm going to go back to our blank for just a second. One of the important things I want you to know, and I don't want you to have any worry about, is your personnel. School administrators are working with our Title I office on determining their personnel. Principals are meeting with Valley and myself to talk about what individuals they want in positions next year. And if they don't necessarily have specific individuals, they know what positions they want, whether they want intervention teachers, or they want instructional paras, or they're looking for an additional instructional coach, things like that. That communication is going on between school leaders and our office. And so that information is going to be pre-populated into your CNA for you in rows 4 through 8. So you won't have to worry about trying to calculate how much all of that's going to be. Once we have that information from school administrators, we will do those calculations and we will input that information in for you. There will not be any identifiers, so there won't be any specific names. It will simply be overall amounts, which you'll see when I show you the filled out worksheet in just a second. Now, if we're talking about supplemental curriculum materials, and we talked about the alignment with the content areas and things like that, you can simply grab, copy, and go back and paste in your focus category. And once you know it's a supplemental and it's going to focus on math, the district has compiled an approved list of supplemental curriculum. It's something that schools have been asking for quite a while. And so district leadership has gotten together. They have vetted a lot of supplementals that align with our current core curriculum and our district initiatives. So you have access to that list by highlighting this link and then clicking, and it will take you to the list of approved supplementals. So if we just indicated that we're going to have a math, and I am an elementary school, and IXL is what we were looking for, it's approved. We're going to copy that and move it straight over and paste it into our block, IXL. Now, if by chance there is a curriculum resource that your school has found to be very beneficial to your students, you have the opportunity to do a special request. And let me show you how that works. Right here, I mentioned before the special request for approval. If you have a resource that you would like to use that's not on the approved list, your administrator will need to complete the special request form. You will here include the name of the activity or the name of the resource, and then provide a rationale. Now, this rationale needs to be based on your school-wide improvement plan. It needs to include specific data related to your school an ESSA evidence that shows and gives a rationale for why this resource that's not on the approved list has been beneficial for your school, is needed to meet the needs of your student. Once you've completed that, the principal will sign this form, and that form will be uploaded into your CNA folder. When the CNAs are all turned in, all of the special request forms will be printed, and a district level work group will be compiled to review them. This form is not reviewed solely within the Title I office. As I said, there will be a district level work group that will review them, and upon completion of the review, the work group will either approve the special request, at which point that activity remains in the CNA. If the work group determines that the request will be denied, that information will be communicated back to the school, and ongoing consultation will then take place. So if you are looking at something that you did not see on the supplemental approved list, know that you do have an additional opportunity to get something that you have evidence is working at your school reviewed for approval. So now that we're kind of going back a little bit, we have math, we have its IXL, function and object codes. Again, you have your reference chart here, but we often in Title I, there's usually just a handful of different codes that we use. So we thought it would be helpful maybe if we created drop downs for you. And so if you drop down, you'll be able to find and click on the function code that you need for your activity. Now, when it comes to something like IXL, most likely that's either going to be instruction, which means it's going on during the regular school day, or it's going to be extended learning, which means you're going to be utilizing it for after school or summer school. So you would pick one of those. We're going to pick instruction. IXL, we know, is a web-based program. So we're going to click on our object codes and you can see that. So web-based programs are technology-related rentals. We click on that, and now our function and object codes are there for us. In column G, you enter the amount that is needed for this activity. You select your funding source. For a lot of your funding sources, it will be Title I Part A, but we do utilize the CNA for our Title I Part D schools. We also have schools that have TISA funds or UNISIC funds, so those are here as well. We have included ESSER. We've also included Title I district funds, and I'll tell you about those, why those are there in just a minute, or other funds. Your school may choose to use SAC funds or PTA funds or other types of funds that are available to fund an activity that you want and need, but that is not going to be covered under your Title I Part A or one of your other funding sources. So you can indicate by using the drop down which funding source you're going to use. Now, we talked a little bit before about prioritizing. Prioritizing is critical. We want you to plan activities slightly beyond your tentative allocation. The purpose of that is so if during the final allocation process, it's determined that your school is going to actually receive more money, we won't necessarily need to have to come back to you and say, oh, you've got $5,000 you need to come up with an activity now, and we need you to turn it around in 2 days. We don't want putting that type of stress on you. So if you go ahead and plan beyond your allocation and prioritize in the order of the greatest need to the things we need but aren't the greatest need. It's like if we've got more money, we really would like to do this, and that's your lower priority rank, then we'll be able to grab up those extra activities without having to come back and bother you about trying to figure out what they might be. In J, you're going to tell us the implementation timeline for your activity. K is frequency and duration. L is your grade level and target groups. Slide over so that you can see M is your links for your quotes, which is very, very important. We need quotes, shopping carts, and proposals. That helps us to also determine, to make sure that the function and object codes are correct and that we don't end up having to do a code amendment before we can let you start implementing activity. And then our final column is your monitoring and your evaluation method for your activities. This will make a lot more sense once you see the completed sample. That one will show you in just a second. But if we click at the bottom, you'll go to your parent and family engagement budget, and you'll see it's set up in much the same way, except your area focus here. Only choice is parent and family engagement because this is a completely separate allocation. It's not part of your basic. It's in addition to your basic allocation. So you would have your parent family engagement under the areas of focus or the focus categories we mentioned earlier. These are some of the most common parent and family engagement categories to select from. You would have your activity title, your function object codes, similar as you do on your regular basic page. So let's go back and actually look at one that has some information in it. You can see what a completed CNA worksheet might look like. So as I mentioned before, our office will be working with the school administrator to work on all of this personnel information. You can see it simply says salary, retirement, SSI, group insurance, and early retirement. Those are the category, those are the descriptions included for personnel costs for traditional district schools. Charter and private schools can be a little bit different. They may not pay all of these benefits, or they may not pay them in the same rates that the traditional district schools do. But we will fill out this personnel section for you, which includes the number of units. You can see this is 3 units, 3 FTE, or 3 full units, and the amounts, but there's no identifiers, nobody's name is linked in this section to that. You can also see that the school has ranked their personnel as priority 1. Cells as it is. Oh, can't do it because I'm in presentation mode. Sorry. But that is priority 1 for the school personnel. Absolutely. You can see in this sample, they've selected 2 supplementals, one for ELA to support ELA, and one is related to technology. They selected from the supplemental curriculum list. Rewards reading intervention. It's an approved activity. So they simply were able to copy that and enter it and paste it right there. It's going to be used during the regular school day. So it's a 5100 is student workbooks. So it's a 520 textbook. They have the amount. It's coming from their Title I Part A funding. They gave it a priority 3. The program is 25 lessons, and they plan on starting on September 1st and going through November 10th. You don't have to be this specific, but if you can, that's great. We also know that you might need flexibility, but we do need some type of timeline for when an activity is going to be implemented. They're telling us that this is going to be 3 times a week during a push-in intervention. So the plan is to use rewards, push-in intervention 3 times a week between September and November. And very important, here is the link to their shopping cart so that we can review the materials to ensure that the right functioning object codes have been assigned. Now you can see their second supplemental was a technology, some laptops. Again, there's the computer code for that, the funding amount. They gave this a priority 5. It's important, but it's not as important as some of their other things. And the purpose of this is to be used 2 to 3 times a week to support EDI. And this is for their grades 3 through 5 because it's aligned to their EDI that they're doing here. And then here's their shopping cart for those materials. They've selected professional development as an area of focus and looking at those core material standards and benchmarks for alignment there. Grade level collaborative planning. They have teacher stipends. You can see the codes for those. Teacher stipends get SSI benefits only. And here's a description of how often it's going to start in September. And it's going to be up to 1.5 hours on the first and second Wednesdays of each month. And it's for their teachers in K through 5. Now, something to take note of that was brought to our attention this year, and it was kind of new for us, was that instructional coaches, including the IIC, have different object code than teachers. A teacher is a 120 object code. An IIC or other instructional coach at your school is a 130. That's other certified personnel. So if you're going to have professional development where teachers and coaches are going to be together, or coaches are going to be helping to facilitate professional development, and they're going to receive a stipend for that, their stipend has to be broken out separate from the teacher stipends. I know that's an extra step. It does make it slightly more complicated, but it is something that has been pointed out to us by the Office of Grants Management that we need to make sure that we are implementing correctly, is those object codes for our instructional coaches and our IICs. So you can see here, they have the teachers here. They have 2 coaches on their campus that are going to be helping with that. And so they have their stipends here. All right, so let's talk about extended learning. Extended learning is awesome. And you will see, I know that Valerie has been mentioning to principals as she's been talking with them, we have a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with ESSER for 23-24. And that is because ESSER is funding and can fund after-school tutoring and EDI for teachers, okay? They can also fund summer school in 2024 for teachers. So you'll see here, this school has determined that, yes, they want after-school tutoring, and yes, they want summer school for June of 2024. They've identified how many teachers and how many sessions for both, and they've done their calculations, and they have identified ESSER funds for those activities. The ESSER funds are going to be used for that. This also helps, as we've been talking about, trying to collaborate with other federal programs and cross-coordinate. If you're putting your EDI and your summer school into your CNA and you plan on utilizing those ESSER funds and you're not planning on utilizing your Title I funds for teachers, please go ahead and put it in here. We can extrapolate that information out and provide it to project development, which will greatly help them with their planning of their funds for the year as well. So please go ahead and put that in, and we will be sharing that information with them. But something you do need to know when it comes to EDI and summer school, ESSER is not covering IICs. It is covering instructional staff. And as we said before, Office of Grants Management has coaches separate from instructional staff like teachers. So if you are going to do EDI with ESSER funds and you want your IIC there for coaching and facilitation, you'll want to include your coach here in your EDI. The same is true for summer school. If you want your IIC or an instructional coach to be present during summer school for coaching purposes and facilitation, then you are going to want to write them into your Title I Part A. ESSER will not cover them. ESSER is only covering the instructional staff. So keep that in mind. Again, EDI only gets Social Security benefits. Summer school gets full benefits minus group insurance. No group insurance for summer school. But it does get all of the other benefits such as retirement and early retirement and Social Security. Again, that is on your calculation page that can help you with that. And as always, your teacher specialist and anyone in the Title I office can help you work through this process as you are starting that planning. You'll also take note that Achieve 3000 and Reflex with FRAX, that's the fractions program. We are working to ensure that we can provide those to schools this year as well under Title I district funds. So you'll see that Title I district funds has been selected for those. We'll be working with schools to determine numbers of licenses for Achieve. Reflex is a site license for the entire school. So one site license for each school is all that's needed. But when it comes to Achieve, that is an individual student license contract. So we'll be working with schools to help determine the number of licenses that can be covered under district funds. If a school wanted to purchase additional Achieve licenses with their school-based funds, you are more than welcome to do that as well. And the last thing to talk about under extended learning opportunities is field trips. And field trips can be a little bit tricky because they can be written up in two different ways. This example is the 4th grade field trip to St. Augustine. And with the touring company that operates this field trip, they include their bus fees as an inclusive price. It's not separate. So when you have a company and your bus fee is inclusive of everything, you actually are coding that as an extended learning, $5,900, and $330 general travel, because the bus fees are all inclusive. This is different than other field trips where your charter buses are charging separate from the place that you're going. For example, several schools like to go to the Museum of Science and Industry in Tampa. The MOSI has an entrance fee, and then the charter bus company has their fees. When you have a field trip that have those two distinct pieces, the entry fee to the place you're going would be the $5,900, $330, and you can see there, that's why it says field trip entry fees, be $330. Your charter bus fees would be $7,800 for the charter bus fees, and then also $330 for the general travel. So please work with your specialist. If you're considering a field trip, they can help you determine if you are going to have 2 lines for your field trip or just 1. Okay. Now let's look at some, that's all I have for you for a basic worksheet. Let's look at a parent-family engagement worksheet and see what that might look like. You can see here, they have selected their drop-down, obviously area of focus is parent-family engagement. It's the only one for this one. But using the focus categories, they've selected some of their additional alignments. They've got annual meeting, they've got homeschool communication, they have ELA and math, they have STEAM, and then they have transition supports. So those are the types of activities they plan on doing. And then this is the specific activity description for that. Food and general supplies for their annual meeting, which they have coded. 6150 is the only function code for parent-family engagement, so you're good. And then here are the typical object codes for parent-family engagement. If you need something different than what you see here, we can work with you on that. But this is 99.5% of the object codes that are utilized for parent and family engagement. They've entered their amount, their funding source, and a priority rank, which will be important when I show you why. Just a second. They talked about when they're going to do it, how long it's going to be, who their target group is, and filled it all the way across. For their homeschool communication, this is their activity. They want their polyvinyl communication folders. They've got their funding, they've got their codes, they've got their amount all the way over here. You get to it, and they've linked their shopping cart so that we can see exactly what they're asking for. Under their ELA and math, they've got a standards and curriculum night where they're asking for teacher stipends. Again, stipend and and Social Security. And then some general office supplies. They have their codes, their amounts, their funding, when they're going to do it. And they're planning on having 2 sessions. Each session is an hour and a half. So one in October, one in February. What I would expect to see here that's not here yet, because this is just a sample, is the shopping cart for these supplies to make sure that we can look and see that all those supplies really are 510s and that there aren't things in there that might be 520s or 642s, other types of supplies that might need additional lines because of their object codes. Same thing, a breakdown for their STEM or their STEAM, and their transition support for their kindergarten roundup and the transition support for their 5th grade. Now, let's talk about that priority. Very, very important. They have priority ranked their activities. And they have because their total activities exceed their tentative allocation. By ranking these, we can determine which ones will automatically be added just simply by going down. And once we run into the amount that fits within their budget, we know that priorities 1 through 3 are definitely included. Priority 4, if we added them, would make them go over budget if, in fact, nothing changes with their budget amount. So at that time, there could be a brief conversation about, okay, activities 1 through 3 are in. Activity 4 is going to put you over budget. How do you want to amend activity 4? And then they would also know that activity 5 and 6 were not going to be included at this time. That doesn't mean you're throwing them away. It's possible that you might be able to pick those up during an amendment, which is also another reason to plan beyond your allocation, because then you don't have to go back to the drawing board when you're looking for activities for an amendment. You already have them here. You're like, oh, we weren't able to do activity 5 the first time around. We still are planning on doing that activity, but now we have some funding that we can add to it. That's the same for your main budget. Plan beyond your budget, and that helps begin a possible list of activities for amendment if you were to need them. Okay. So that is all I have for the budget worksheet. We are here to support you throughout this entire process. So please just know that we're going to walk with you hand in hand, step by step, the whole way through. We will have a live Q&A session this Wednesday, February 22nd at 2:30 p.m. So be on the lookout for the link to be emailed to administrators and lead teachers. Please feel free to share that link with anyone on your school-based team that you feel would benefit from participating in the question and answer session this Wednesday. CNAs will be due to our office on Thursday, March 9th. We do realize that this is a quick turnaround, but we hope that the amount of assistance that our team can provide to you between now and then will help you get all of the things taken care of and accounted for in your CNA as you want them to be for your planning purposes. Again, thank you for joining us today on behalf of the entire Title I team. We are here to support you and provide assistance throughout this entire process. So please feel free to reach out to your specialist or anyone on our Title I team for support as you need it throughout the next couple of weeks. Have a great day.